I meet so many creators who just want to be in the space creating content, but don't understand the commercial aspect, don't know how to make money from it.
Our guest today is Reim El Houni, and to talk about what she does is difficult. All I can say is if you can imagine somebody who's a queen of broadcasting, new media and old media, that would be her.
The average audience doesn't care. And that's what's made it possible for so many people, because it's become an even playing field where the person who has just picked up a camera can easily put up a video. And especially with all the algorithm shifts at the moment, their content may completely supersede yours and attract a larger audience.
Do you think that it's possible to learn those skill sets now in the world we've got?
Where the industry is constantly evolving, and you need to put yourself in as many different environments as possible to learn from the leaders in those environments. And I think different producers, different directors do things differently. So I do still think it's possible, but maybe the pace of it is faster. A lot of what we do is still in the broadcast space. We still produce TV shows. We have a daily TV show that's on Dubai One at the moment called DXB Today. I understand the ecosystem is changing. The TV world still holds a much higher credibility than YouTube does.
Welcome back to Gladiator TV. I'm Dave Crane, and Dariush is traveling and saving the world, so I'm going to be looking after you today. We've got an amazing show ahead of you today. If you're interested in finding out more about where TV is going and all the new media that's kind of replacing the stuff that you might have grown up with, then you will learn more now than you probably will learn from many other shows, things you've read about, or even if you don't Google anymore, what your AI has told you. Our guest today is Reim El Houni, and to talk about what she does is difficult. All I can say is if you can imagine somebody who's a queen of broadcasting, new media and old media, that would be her. More to come. Enjoy the show. This is Gladiator TV. Reim, pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, we've known each other now for, 18 years, and for some strange reason, it's always been like we've passed each other at the same events, and the same group of people, we know the same people, we've worked with the same people, we've never actually had a chance to work together. And so what I love about today is I wanted to get your take on where media is going, and also get to know a little bit more about you at the same time, because you're ex-BBC as well, aren't you?
I am, so there's a lot to talk about today.
Shall we start with that beginning then? What brought you to Dubai, and what was your, qualifications, experience more in BBC, etc., when you came here?
So I'm very fortunate that I've always been highly obsessed with the world of film and TV and content, from my childhood. And that really kind of led me to be so persistent to break into this industry. And just tell a quick story, but I was someone who desperately wanted to work in TV studios in the UK. And I used to kind of watch all my favorite shows and record them on VHS tape. And I'd write down the names of everybody in the credits. And I knew that BBC was first name.surname at bbc.co.uk. And I just blanket emailed everybody.
Wow.
And eventually that worked. And I made it onto BBC Watchdog. And I was an intern at the time, but also as an intern there, they only keep you for a very limited period of time. Mm-hmm. And I remember holding my BBC pass thinking, I don't want to give this up. How do I stay in the building? And I literally went from department to department going, hi, I'm an intern on Watchdog and I'm available. And, by about the 7th or 8th department, I tapped BBC Education, and they were about to start a new series. And I said, can you research? And I'm like, yes, I can research and I'm available. And I ended up with them for 2 years as a researcher. So full circle, I was at university 2 days a week, and I was at BBC Education 3 days a week. Wow. So by the time I was 18, I already had my name in the credits. And it was, honestly, that should give you a bit of a taste of my obsessiveness about this industry. And I've just grown up through the ranks since then. I think our industry is a very clear one in terms of a ladder. You start off as a runner, and then you're a production assistant, then you're, assistant producer, a production manager, and so on. So I've worked my way up. And then I came here in 2007 on what was meant to be a holiday. And I arrived and I was like, it's sunny. Growing up in the UK, you appreciate the
Whereabouts
sunshine.
In the UK?
I grew up in London, central London. And the other thing I realized was there's a whole media city here. And I beelined it to Media City on my holiday. And same thing, they used to sell these guidebooks of all the companies in Media City. bought the guidebook, sat in a coffee shop, contacted pretty much all the companies in there. On my 1 week holiday, had 5 interviews, got 3 job offers and signed a contract.
Amazing.
And that was 18 years ago. So, and I've been here ever since.
That's fantastic. Now, I came from a different angle of the same thing. I wanted to be in front of the cameras.
Yeah.
And so my background was growing up in the UK, listening to Radio 1 and wanting to be one of those DJs who was on stage with all the pop stars. And so my angle was I became a journalist and then went on to work at the BBC. But I never really wanted to work my way up from the inside. I wanted to be there in front of the cameras, in front of microphones. And so I know how hard it is from a different angle to be able to get those positions where they turn around and actually bring you into the fold. One of the hardest things to do is to crack the beeb and be on the inside.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I was only there for 2 years, and post that, because anyone in the broadcast ecosystem will know they tend to offer short-term contracts, freelance contracts for a season, so it's a very difficult environment to have a long-term kind of stable job. And at the time, I was quite young, and it was like, how do I get some stability in this industry? So I actually spent about 5 or 6 years working my way up the corporate production ladder. And I think, looking back now, I'm so grateful for that time, because it meant that by the time I got here, I had the broadcast experience, but then I also had the corporate experience, working with clients, understanding, how to meet their objectives. And that's a very different way of working than it is, on the editorial broadcast side. So fortunately, I've had exposure to both. And I think that's a very unique mix in this part of the world.
I mean, you can see with your qualifications and your CV and the successes that you've had, just how much that all came together. My background was very similar but different, as we established. But I went to the holiday camps in the UK to be an entertainer. I learned how to be able to work audiences of all sorts, whether it's bingo with old people or kids games with families and all this other stuff. So when it all came together in Dubai, you find there's an area that like your commercial aspects of the corporate world, that most of the people who are contemporaries, I won't say so much competition, but in the same industry, have no idea how to pivot and no idea how to make a fully rounded business model that you could take into broadcasting and turn it into something that pays back.
I think that's spot on, because honestly, I often, especially now, I meet so many creators who just want to be in the space creating content, but they don't understand the commercial aspect, don't know how to make money from it. But I think you're absolutely right. If you've worked in that environment and you know what a brand needs from, the content you're producing, or what their end objective is, or how to even create and customize what you're producing so it aligns with their bigger brand objectives, then there's a much higher chance that synergy will be there, and it ultimately will benefit your pocket.
Now, I don't know the easy way of putting your successes from Dubai into an explanation to the audience. So what I'm going to do is just let you go blur.
Sure.
Share your qualifications, your awards, and so on. Because if I get it wrong and miss a bit, I'll feel so bad.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll try and condense it. But yeah, I moved here 18 years ago. I was actually the second employee at Dubai One. So Poonam Verma, the presenter of Out and About, was number 1. She's still a very close friend. I was number 2.
Wow.
So I produced, wrote, directed the first English language TV show here, which was Out and About, which is actually where I believe we met.
I remember so well.
Yeah, I remember filming you
when I was
on
a
the
hypnotist.
Show. When you were exactly, that was it. I grew with the channel. So I became an executive producer with the channel, managing multiple shows, and then head of events, and that involved things like the opening of Burj Khalifa and the air show and Dubai Film Festival at the time. So they were great projects. I really enjoyed my role, but I just got to a point where I was like, time for me to move on, primarily because in our industry you work ridiculous hours and you work through the night, and I just needed a break. And when that happened, I'll cut a long story short, but I discovered Mission Impossible were in Dubai, and I was like big budget movie, you need to get some experience on that. So I was very fortunate to work on Mission Impossible. Ghost Protocol.
How did you get on to Mission Impossible? You looked up at Burj Khalifa and, that's Tom. I'll just email him now.
No. Well, another story there. It was quite funny because it was my last day at Dubai One, and I genuinely had zero plans. Like I'd quit my job, and everyone thought I was crazy, and I didn't really know what I was going to do next. But I knew I had to kind of discover my own path. And it was on my last day that I found out Mission Impossible were coming to town to film. And I was like, oh, how do I get on this? So I remember, the weekend used to be Friday, Saturday, and Friday I fixed my CV and I started calling people. And I went, anyone know anyone working on Mission Impossible? And eventually a friend of mine said, oh, I know the production manager, she's coming to dinner. I was like, I'm coming to dinner. And I went to that dinner. And when you sit in a dinner, I was sitting there just waiting for this moment to say my piece. And eventually,
just bring my CV with me.
Yeah, and you're sitting there having polite conversation, and eventually my friend says, "Oh, Reem's just left a position as an executive producer at Dubai One," and I was like, "And I'm available." And she said, "Oh, well, we've hired everybody." I said, "No, I'll do anything." She said, "No, we've literally hired everyone." I said, "No, I will do anything." And she said, "Oh, well, we may have a vacancy in the transport department. I'll do transport."
Wow.
And she said, "Are you sure?" I'm like, yep, I'm available. I had an interview the next day and I started the following day.
Amazing.
So by the Sunday, I was...
What, you're driving a van?
Well, no, you see, that confuses a lot of people. I was responsible for the movements of, I think it was something like 80 vans and 60 trucks on a daily basis, and all the vehicles. So anyone who needed picking up anywhere. And it was a very funny time, because imagine having gone from being an executive producer, a very high profile senior role, to managing people's cars. And I remember this phone call my mum had with me. She's like, "Are you trying to tell me that you left your position, working on a government broadcast station, reporting to the CEO, to manage people's cars?"
Yeah, like a call center at a taxi
and I was
cab.
like, "Yes, Mum, on a massive Hollywood blockbuster movie. I'll let you know how it goes." And a lot of people thought that something had gone wrong in my life, that I'd now kind of decided to do this. But I don't think they realized that for me, this was the biggest learning curve ever. And I would do it again. If you gave me an opportunity tomorrow that meant I had to go right back to the bottom, I would do it again. Because it gave me a massive level of confidence, because I realized that all my experiences in the TV space, or the corporate space, where I was used to 40, 50 people on sets. And when you work on or see, the inner workings of a movie of this scale, it was 400, 500 people on set. Wow. So for me, but the processes were the same. So it made me realize that, I could do that. It's just a matter of scale. I do 40, 50, they do 400, 500. But understand the processes. I know what they're doing. So I came out of that. It was only a 3-month stint, because they were only filming in Dubai for 3 months. Yeah. When I came out of that, I was like, yeah, this is something I can do. I could see Hollywood blockbuster movies in my future. And if anything, I would not take that experience back at all. No. And I set up my company a month later.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love what you said about that, the idea that what you'd already experienced just translated to a bigger scale. And the bigger scale is the one where everyone goes, "No, I couldn't do it."
Yeah.
But you find it's actually the same thing. There's just a lot more smoke and mirrors attached to it. When I went from DJing, say, Friday brunches to running the Rugby Sevens entertainment for 20 years, it's the same thing. You had a load of people having a party. You got to play music. You got to keep them interested.
Yeah.
And the things translate. But here's the thing I find fascinating, but we haven't got near your qualifications yet. We've just been fascinated by your Mission Impossible story. Before we get onto it, do you think that it's possible to learn those skill sets now in the world we've got, which is all about the finished product? And we need it yesterday. Whereas what you've done, and I know that I did as well, we did a lot of what seemed to be creating this, didn't make sense, but it did to me, CV, that you couldn't actually calculate, and it would make no sense to anybody to follow those paths to get to where you are now.
I think, the industry is constantly evolving, and you need to put yourself in as many different environments as possible to learn from, the leaders in those environments. And I think different producers, different directors do things differently. So I do still think it's possible, but maybe the pace of it is faster. So, there's so much change in just a 6-month period, whereas perhaps, when I was growing up, things were a bit more stable and it took longer for those shifts to happen. But I do think it's possible, and I do think it's important.
Do you think that it's because social media is so immediate that the changes have to happen faster? Because the things that we talked about, we had years to learn. Maybe we didn't have years to make it happen. That happened straight away. But maybe because it wasn't so public, it wasn't so accessible. And so maybe it's more of a closed shop that you have to get your way in and then you learn those skills.
That's true. And I also think that the accessibility is key. Everyone I know is buying a camera and taught themselves how to film, downloaded a few apps, can edit their own content. that's great. I'm very happy that, we're seeing an explosion in our industry. I think we joked about the fact that, we're finally popular. Like for years, I used to say, you need video content. And people are like, we're going to focus on our website and we're going to focus on our, flyers and we're going to focus on our banners, and then video. If we're lucky, there'd be some budget left right at the bottom. And now it's like front and center and at the top of the list. But I still think the experience shows. And I think that when I see content from someone who's grown their way up the industry and had exposure to proper sets and proper production, they understand lighting better, they understand framing, they understand storytelling, they understand pace, they understand it in a very different way, where the end result, it shows in the end result, versus someone who's been able to teach themselves and kind of cobble it together, in half the time. So I still think there's a value there for the experience and for taking the longer route.
I want to continue your story, but just on that point that you made there, you're absolutely right. You can tell those who do it really well, and you can tell those who just throw it out there. But your average audience member, do they care?
No, they don't. That's the sad part. The sad part is you're right. The average audience doesn't care. And that's what's made it possible for so many people, because, it's become an even playing field where the person who has just picked up a camera can easily put up a video, and especially with all the algorithm shifts at the moment, their content may completely supersede yours and attract a larger audience. So you're right, they don't, the average audience. However, the people who do care are probably, high profile individuals, government entities, award bodies, so the people who that quality matters to are going to be the people you want to impress. So I think it ends up being, what's your end objective? Is your end objective to grow an audience? Is your end objective to work in a certain playing field? Is your end objective to win awards? And depending on what your end objective is, then you need to think through what type of content will make that possible for you.
It's fascinating to just lift the lid off this. I remember interviewing Kate Adie, who was a very famous BBC foreign correspondent, and she was like a grand old dame of news from the BBC, worldwide respected. And she was talking about the fact that at the time, and this is maybe about 8 years ago, I talked to her, we were talking about the growth of citizens broadcasting, which was people who on their phones would just report something, send it to a TV station. And what she said the BBC always did was they'd basically say, okay, fine, very, very nice, okay. Then they'd call them back and Google the person to see if they picked up the phone and if they were credible, and then we'd want another source, and then they could verify it and put it out there. Now, it's a massive luxury that just doesn't exist anymore. It's whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. If there's evidence to prove it might be true, let's just throw it out there.
Well, just on that point, I don't actually talk about this often, but I'm originally from Libya, and my parents happen to have, unfortunately, been in Tunisia, then moved to Egypt, then moved to Libya, like literally days, like during the whole Arab Spring period. And then they ended up coming to Dubai and staying with me for a while. And they literally banked on their Facebook pages, to know what was going on in those cities and countries, because of citizen journalists. So it was very fascinating for me to see it, where, my dad would be watching the news, but my mum would be avidly watching Facebook. And she'd come in and go, oh, this has just happened in this community. Look at this video. And it's making people realize, well, no, you do have an added value. A great example of that is Lucy Chow. She's in the investment space. And she said, why would I do this? Anyone can Google, I suppose now, ChatGPT, whatever they want. I said, yeah, but how many of them are Chinese female with your level of experience in the Middle East talking about investments? That's a very unique voice. And I think everyone needs to understand that they have their own unique voice and experience that will resonate with someone. I'm not the only person talking about video and being visible. There are plenty of other people, but I know that I'm going to resonate with certain individuals in a very different way. I think the fact that I'm female, the fact that I'm Arab, the fact that I'm in my 40s, the fact that I'm graying, all these things actually work for me because I know my audience. I know who resonates with my message. So I think there's this whole overwhelming feeling of there's enough content out there. Why would I add to it? Yeah. I hear that one often. I also hear people say, oh, but I've got a team to do it. Why do I need to do it? I said, because it's your personal brand. People want to connect with you. People often, I post my own LinkedIn content every day. People don't realize that I do it. You do it? Like, yeah, because it's my brand has got to be me. I need to connect with people. So I think that's another misconception. And there's also a whole universe of people who feel it's culturally inappropriate. And that to me is fascinating because I'm Arab and I did grow up in a world where it felt culturally inappropriate. And for years, whenever I posted anything, my mum would say one of two things. She'd say aib, which means it's inappropriate, or hayatuk ain, which means you're going to get an evil eye. And this happened. It got to a point where I stopped posting on Facebook because that was where my family was. Yeah. And I was like, no, I can't. I need to just.
We all did when we found our family on it.
Exactly. But I need to just continue on this path. But I see it more, it's not just females, but I was going to say more females start to get out of their own way and like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to, and often it's when they're in their 40s and 50s, because I feel like at that point in time, they're going through some life transition where they realize that, why didn't I do this before? Or perhaps they've gained the confidence at that point where they realize it's time. And I wish they got it earlier, but I'm seeing that cultural shift or that cultural lens change at that time as well.
I think there's a lot to be said for that particular age on all levels, because even in the corporate space, that's the age when most people find that they can't get a job again, or they get laid out because they want to get somebody cheaper and younger, and they have to reinvent themselves. So there's a lot of questions that didn't exist before. In the old days, that's a home straight. Yeah. You get in your 40s, 50s, you keep going, and you'll get your gold watch in another 20 years.
Yeah.
Don't drop anything, and you'll be fine. But I think people are asking more questions, and the questions are floating around more than before. But what I find, talking about the Arab space and so on, Saudi's got a massive social media presence, of which the country, something like, 60% are under 30 years old. And so they're embracing it and loving it, really smart, clever people. So there is something happening. But what I find is really strange is my daughter, who's 14, doesn't want to do it. She wants privacy. There's a kind of massive, it's not imposter syndrome. I don't know whether it's because devices are so central to their relationship to the world, they only want to go through that, they don't want to be on that. I don't know if that's the way to say it. Our generation, happy days. Yeah, okay, that's a new game, we get to be on TV, love it, let's do it. But the next generation, my daughter's generation, and she is a singer, she's a talker, she speaks on different things. To get her to start a YouTube channel, there's a definite disconnect. She loves art, she loves music, but she's not interested. And I don't know how much of that is something that is typical for human nature, or it's a certain generation that don't buy into it. The same way as we look at boomers and we say, why are they not sharing anything with anybody else?
Well, I'm wondering, I'm very curious to see what happens in the next couple of years, because, a lot of what we do is still in the broadcast space. We still produce TV shows. We have a daily TV show that's on Dubai One at the moment called DXB Today. And I love TV. I understand the ecosystem is changing, and I've always understood that YouTube is, if anything, if you're actually looking at the numbers, YouTube has a much higher reach and engagement than broadcast. Well, I don't know if it will again, but that it has in a long time. But what's very interesting is that the TV world still holds a much higher credibility than YouTube does. So, for example, if I'm going to call high-profile X person and say, would love to invite you onto my YouTube channel, the likelihood of them jumping on board, they'll want to know the statistics, they'll want to know your reach, they'll want to understand your audience, they're going to ask you 101 questions about your YouTube channel and wonder if it's worth their time. But I can call the exact same individual and say, I'd love to have you as a guest on our TV show. Yeah. Yes. Because instantly in their head, it's like, this is a credible media outlet, institution, and the fact that you're in a proper TV studio and a big set, and those little elements, perception is reality. Those little elements make someone feel like, this is something that was on my bucket list that I want to tick off, and it gives me that credibility, and I'm able to add as seen on so and so channel. And so those variables still very much exist here.
I think that is because the people that they answer to think like that. So the corporate world is still very old school. So if you want to then talk to the corporate world and you say, I've been on these YouTube channels, they're not going to get it. And the procurement department aren't going to spend any money. But if you can show them that the establishment has welcomed me, then that's translatable. But let's get into that massive lifting the lid off and it all goes out. Old media, new media. Starting point, let's jump in at the deep end with Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, biggest YouTuber, possibly biggest broadcaster on the planet.
I mean, yeah, his audience is huge, and I'm personally a fan of Beast Games, like the amount of money that went into that show. But I am a fan.
So on Amazon Prime, they persuade him. They can't persuade him to give up his empire for $1 billion because he can make more and he can do burgers and everything he wants to. But persuade him to take a shed load of cash and create a TV show to go on old media, which was successful. I think he gave away $1 million or something of the end prize, but he doesn't need it. And does old media need new media? Is old media going to survive? What would be what do you see going on? Because you've got a foothold in both sides.
Well, it's very interesting because I always travel to conventions abroad to kind of get a gauge of what's happening in other countries. And last year I went to Cannes twice. There's a big conference there called MIPCOM and MIPTV, which is where all the TV broadcasters and go and learn about trends in television. And I thought, I'm going to go because I want, it's been a while since I'd gone. I want to understand what's happening. And both times, almost every single panel I sat to listen to were talking about YouTube.
Right.
And so I found it fascinating that I traveled all the way to this TV conference to hear what the latest TV trends are and how I can work with more broadcasters, only to hear the broadcasters themselves say that, you know what, go ahead and try your luck on YouTube. The broadcasters themselves are watching the YouTube landscape, and shows that are, pulling a good audience are being tapped to then move into the broadcast ecosystem. Ultimately, if you look at traditional media and you look at broadcast channels, the majority of them are not taking big new risks. The majority of them are commissioning formats that have worked in other countries, in other territories, or have worked for years, or they're resuscitating old formats that we grew up with and like giving them a new kind of shade of paint, or, and they're in that zone because they're trying to put money on bankable ideas that they know will attract an audience. It's very difficult, very, very difficult to get a new TV show commissioned that doesn't have a track record. So where can you prove that track record? On YouTube. So what you now have is a whole ecosystem of content creators and production companies, and in some cases, brands that are starting to understand that if you can show a track record on YouTube, that strengthens your position to now get this show made, produced, commissioned by a broadcaster, which actually means that we still hold broadcasters in higher esteem than we do the online ecosystem, despite the fact that that's where the growth and the audience is.
It's fascinating to look at that tentative relationship between the two, because right now, and I study a lot of what's still happening with the BBC, for instance, in the UK, quality programming has altered so dramatically in the last couple of years. So virtually nobody is paying for journalists or presenters to do local news. There's no money in it. Who's going to pay for it? And if you don't have a global audience, who'd be interested in something that happened in your town or in your city or so on? So when they do produce dramas, those dramas on a daily basis might have 700,000 people watching each episode, which is tiny numbers compared to what they used to be. But if you do a game show that cost buttons, half an hour, let's see if you win yourself a fridge, 2 million people per day will tune in to watch that every single day. They go online, they love it, they see the clips, and so we're kind of seeing a demise, like maybe we saw with movies in the cinema in favor of streaming seasons of TV shows, of what's conventional broadcasting. So when you look at in the UK, ITV, BBC, which we've got experience with, they're going to find it very hard to commission or even stay afloat in coming years without having partnerships with other companies, or even just going down the YouTube route.
Well, I think you're seeing that at the moment. I think I read recently ITV has has a partnership currently with YouTube to
Right.
actually put some of their content out there. And there's, I don't remember the details, but I know that there is a partnership that exists. But also, just coming back to Cannes, I know that this year is the first year that YouTube has been invited to MIPCOM, which is traditionally a TV conference. So I think it's becoming very evident that broadcasters, and not just YouTube, but streaming platforms, online platforms, are going to be looking at more of these partnerships in order to kind of put the industry back together so it isn't as fragmented, and potentially you're now leveraging both audiences, the traditional TV audience as well as a streaming one. But also, interestingly, I think it's over 52% of people are watching YouTube on a TV set. So although the content is YouTube, the habits behind sitting in a living room around your TV are still very much there. So I would argue that it's just the content coming from a different medium, but we're still watching it in a traditional way. I mean, I remember a few years ago, there was this whole thing of, second devices and third devices and how many devices are on in a household. But it's all coming back to that main TV screen is what I'm seeing.
Well, that's fascinating. I've got to say, in my house, we all watch different stuff on different screens. And also, it's so hard to get my 14-year-old, who I love beyond anything, to pay more attention to anything that's too long to watch. So I've got her in a headlock and said, right, watch The Breakfast Club and watch these incredible movies that I grew up with.
Yeah.
And she's kind of reluctantly fell in love with them.
Yeah.
But I do remember, probably being a very bad dad, saying, this is South Park, when she was about 11. And she watched it and she was taken aback by it. But South Park has become one of those incredible entities, especially recently, where they are incredible on YouTube, incredible on their broadcaster, but they have a pulse of what the world is talking about, maybe even beyond the way that anybody can force them to go down a certain path. So I think that there's certain outliers that manage to get the mix of things right. South Park's been running for like 30 years, which I found astonishing, but it's still as fresh as it used to be. Where do people fill? What are the gaps? What do you say when it comes to programming? This is your route to market. Clearly, with that cooking show, you worked out that this is something nobody else is doing in the way that this lady can, or that the Asian lady is able to turn around and do a show all about finances. Are there gaps for everybody?
I really believe that. I really, truly, honestly believe that anyone out there can find their niche as long as they themselves are passionate about it and ideally knowledgeable as well. Then it's about being consistent and adding value to an audience. You will find an audience. There are people who probably love, following you. There are people who love following me. People who hate me, that's fine. You'll find someone else to follow. So it's everyone has an audience, but it's about providing value, being passionate enough about it that you'll consistently do it, and just playing the long game, because that's the other thing. A lot of people give up. A lot of people give up around month 2, 3, 4, 5 when they feel like, I'm not getting the results, people aren't watching. Well, no, maybe it's just little tweaks and little pivots you need to make. And that's one thing I credit Arva with is that she really kept a close eye on all of the data from the YouTube channel Ditch the Silver, to the point where, every week she'd be like, oh, we lost people at this minute, and, things dropped at this point. So how can we revise it next week? Yeah, it's a science. How can we revise it next week? Okay, people didn't watch past minute 8. What did we do wrong at minute 8? And there's a whole universe of people who are studying the data in that way and making those pivots and tweaks, and then you start to see results. But how many people are going to take the effort to do that? Not many. No. Most people are just putting it out there. Didn't work. Okay, put it out there. Didn't work. Oh, didn't work. And just stop.
Are you aware of the Red Queen's hypothesis?
No.
One of my favourite subjects. I learned it about 7 months ago. It was a comment on LinkedIn. Somebody said, just like the Red Queen's hypothesis. So I looked it up. And the Red Queen is the character from Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, who says lots of weird stuff like every character does. But what she says is you've got to keep moving to stay where you are. So when you're doing your analytics and when you're putting out your broadcasting and your shows and your social media, it might not seem like it's growing at a rate where you want it to and it's not going viral. But if you do step back from it, people fill that gap.
Yeah.
And it's like running on a treadmill. If you stop running, it
Yeah.
doesn't seem like you're moving at all. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
But if you stop running, then suddenly everyone moves forward. And if you want to get back on again, there's no gap for you in the way that you had it.
It's funny, I say that often to podcast hosts. So this is a great example of you continuing this podcast whilst Dariush is away, right? Because I see so many people who will do a podcast season. They have the whole season mindset of 10 episodes and I'll stop. I'm like, well, if I'm a fan of your podcast and you've now just stopped, that gives me the room to now explore, discover, find other podcasters. Am I going to remember you when you pop up for season 2? You know what? I've got new people I'm following. So it is very much about consistency and not leaving that gap open for me to go into discovery mode.
Old school newspapers and magazines, where I used to do a lot of that journalism stuff, is if you missed a deadline and somebody couldn't find your magazine on the shelves, they'll get another magazine that's a bit like it. They might not love it as much, but then they get used to it. So when you pop up again the next month, well, I can't buy both, and you'll lose some people that won't come back again.
But also coming all the way back to that point we were making about quality, sometimes being more relevant, more recent, being more timely becomes much more important than being more polished and more, well produced, because I would rather get the news now. I would rather get the update, get that take, if it means I can get it in the moment, versus waiting for a highly polished, edited piece of content that will come out a week later when it's old news. And I think that's what's allowed us to get in tune with raw content, more authentic content, because it feels like it's happening in the moment, and therefore we forgive any quality challenges it may have, because they're doing it live, they're doing it raw, they're doing it now, and that's become more important than ensuring it's a highly quality piece.
Do you see the demise of old media completely, or do you see an evolution of it? So for instance, I smelled a coffee with radio a long, long time ago. Why would you go onto it? Why do you listen to a station when you can have on your phone your own favorite tunes being played on rotation? Why is it you would do that when on the options, a podcaster could be your favorite presenter from TV, interviewing the people they'd normally talk to with no adverts for 2 hours, and you get all the stories that you really would have loved to have heard but had to be chopped off when we're on proper TV. And so the podcasting world is growing at an incredible rate, but most people, as you say, start doing it, don't see results, and drop off before the magic actually happens. And also, I don't think that most people need to have that big audience. They just need to have a community who loves them, that will pay to keep supporting them.
I don't think the broadcast ecosystem will drop completely, and the reason I don't think that is because I think there are certain types of content that everyone will still pool together around to watch on a TV set. Sports is a big example of that. So whenever you have like FIFA World Cup, any big Wimbledon, whatever it is, that is something that the TV audience still all want to tune in and watch the same thing. I think anything in the live event space, ultimately live, for the last few years I've been doing New Year's Eve live every year. Is it an exciting show? Is it a great show? Maybe not, but everyone will still tune in because they want to see the fireworks. So it's one of those things where there are certain events and activities which I don't believe can be captured in the same way on social or on any other platform because of the scale of those events. We were very fortunate to produce the daily live show at Expo. So for all 181 days of Expo, we were live, for 2 hours every day. And that is, yes, were there influencers and content creators producing content? They were. But did they have those moments live? No, they didn't. And I think people still like that energy and want to tune into that energy. So I would say live content, sporting events, or anything that's a milestone. Last year we did, was it last year? The Hope Probe, live. Again, where are you going to see NASA counting down? So it's those key moments in history that I think still will find a home in broadcast.
Is that because of the packaging? Because you've got professionals like yourself who know the whole game. You can say, right, we've got to have the the trailer leading up to the event. We're going to have the branding so it looks good. We're going to go from that camera, and the music plays. All those different steps make it a really strong production. Now, we know in advertising, that's actually a massive turnoff. If you've got an advert for something, most people just want to hear word of mouth from friends that the product is good, rather than watch an advert that's convincing that it's a good product, but it might not be. Do you think that it's that makes a big difference to people, that will keep them watching TV shows being made by the establishment?
I believe so, because I think that even in sports, the number of kind of cameras and angles and, play-by-play and, being able to play things back and the commentators, that's a whole experience that if you're a sports fan, you want to see all of that. You don't want to just see your influencer on the side having a conversation with one player. You want to have that exposure to everything that's available to you when it comes to that event. So I do believe it's, at the moment at least, a universe that only experienced producers are familiar with and know how to pull off. So I look at the ecosystem and I look at our future as a company. I'm very, very aware that everyone out there is producing video. I don't want to compete with anybody. Go ahead, produce your videos. I'm very happy. The game has changed. Where I see our experience coming into play is still on these large scale events, because you can go buy a camera this weekend. I don't see you being able to pull off the live coverage of an event the way I have with my years of experience. So I'm very much trying to almost double down on that right now, which is there are certain things that you have to be experienced to be able to do. That, and for me, the other end of the spectrum is the training and the thought leadership, because I do believe we're moving into an era where it is very much about your personal brand and that anyone can be out there and creating content. So that for me is where I'm focusing my energy. The thought leadership, personal branding space, and the large scale event, live broadcast space, everything in between, I think anyone and everyone is going to be able to do.
It's fascinating. You said something earlier that I wanted to jump in on, but I didn't want to interrupt you. Can you remember a time when we all had mobile phones with cameras on that can make video, but nobody used it for actually making any content? You just maybe take a photo of the family having dinner, and that was it. It must have been about 2 or 3 years before we had the social media outlets where you could put it on. Now, here's something I want to jump in on, because I think it's fascinating. You mentioned sports several times. And we've seen that rock stars are not rock stars anymore. Presenters are not rock stars anymore, because you can get them everywhere. You can convert an influencer to stand in front of a camera, be pretty, talk properly, or talk badly, but be cool while you do it. Movie stars, the movie industry, it's not dead yet, but it's certainly having a hard time, unless you are Tom Cruise, producing something that's going to get people into cinemas. There's an evolution in TV that meant that when, I think for me, it was when the 24 show was being made with Kiefer Sutherland. You got 24 episodes. That was really high quality drama with lots of famous people in it that you'd recognize from the movies. Great production on it. Why would I want to watch one movie for 90 minutes and then wait 3 years to find out what happens next with a sequel when you've got all that? And that started growing in CD box sets, turning into streaming, and now it's the only game in town, whether you're on Netflix or Disney or whatever. It's really about producing seasons, even though they cut them off sometimes when we're just getting interested. But a rock star is not a rock star anymore. I could say the same thing about music. When they went down the route of being able to download music for free, I'm trying to remember what was the name of Napster, okay. Well, when Napster did that, and you didn't have to buy a CD, and I had reams of, no offense on the reams, but reams of CDs and tons of them I had to throw into a skip. When you can download it, there's no money in music. There's only money in the merchandising and the touring. The only area I think that's not true in is rock stars in sport and rock stars in business. They are the new ones that we turn around, and we don't put posters, but that would have been the equivalent for when we were growing up, looking going, wow. Now, for sports, I don't see that disappearing, because the stakes are so high and the money is so high to see who's going to win. It could be anything in football and so on. And I was having this conversation about why it's football, or why women's football, which I love, and all the rest of the stuff that's going on. It's because the money is forcing you to have a look at the odds, and it's so well packaged. The stakes are high, but they're not in the old ways of looking at a rock star. Do you think that's true? And if so, Do you think influencers will be the new rock stars or not? Because there's so many of them, and many of them are really bland.
I think, you touched on sports because it's real. They've trained throughout their lives to compete in these tournaments, in these games. It's talent, it's effort, it's energy, and that's not going to change. So it's not a drama. It's not, something scripted that you can change. It's real drama where you need to watch live to know the outcome. So, the way I see it is that I don't see things changing in sport at all. Personally, we'll watch this space. We'll see what happens next, unless you start entering the whole virtual sporting, domain. But I do think that it's, sports personalities will remain big. I do think that as we evolve in the next, 2, 3, 4 years, we will be seeing business leaders become more high profile and personalities. And I think we're already seeing that.
The two biggest stars on the planet are probably Musk and Trump.
Yeah.
Like him or don't like him, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think when your question about whether influencers will have that same position, I think it truly depends on the influencer, and it depends on what they stand for, and it depends on how authentic they're being, and it depends if this is something they're putting on for a camera or whether it's, who they are. And I think that's the difference when we're talking about sports personalities, business personalities. For the most part, it's who they are. It's the person. Whereas a lot of influencers or content creators I know, it's a job. It's a job. So they're putting out content. They want to be in the food space, so they're putting out a lot of food content, or they want to be in the tech space. Is that who they are? I don't know. So I think it just depends from one person to the next.
Very interesting. I love that, because when we're talking about the fact that I think that when we're looking at business leaders, I think an app is a new hit single. So when in the old days, you bring out a song and everyone would have it on the radio and you'd see it on TV. That's now something that people would have on their phone, and they love it, and they share it, and they all play that game, or they all see that stuff happening. I think it's just evolved, and there's a need for it. I was just thinking what you're saying about the sports there. Why would people be so obsessed with sports? Well, I'm a massive football head. And so whenever I see football, I know that it was originally devised to stop towns attacking each other. What they'd do is choose 11 or whatever players from each team to play in a game. Everyone would get round it, and we're not going to hit you. We're going to watch them, see if they'd win or lose. So it's like a little battle that happens in real time. And I think every sport is a little battle that happens in real time. Not seen as necessarily aggressive, but at the core of it, it really is. I think that that's in human nature, to want to see who's going to win, what's the background, who's like gladiators literally going in and taking part in something where somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose. And even when your team loses by being beaten by a smaller team, say, it's fascinating to work out what happened, what do we need to do. And it's like the best soap opera of all time, because it just evolves. Even when Cristiano Ronaldo retires, who arguably is the most successful football brand of all time, he could do like Beckham and go on and just take another football team and build it up and just be a fashion model and all the rest of it. So I think there is a lot to be said for the evolution of rock stars, the evolution of influence, and it's got to be amplified.
But I think that's why we're also seeing a huge growth in documentaries and docuseries, because people want to see and get to know the people behind the sport, or the people behind the game, or whatever it may be, and it's that guilty pleasure of like, oh, I want to understand the person who I've been watching for years, and get to know what drives them, what gets them to where they are today. So as a result, we're seeing, and most of these documentaries and shows are on streaming platforms, but they are helping build that story and ultimately drive traffic back to the sporting event again. And you're seeing a lot of these partnerships happen with sport and streaming as well. I grew up as a huge WWF fan, WWE, and that's a whole other story.
It's all true.
Don't get me started. But, their partnership with Netflix is epic. So in the last year, all of their shows, their events are all streamed live on Netflix. They've actually just released a show called Unreal, which kind of is a 5-part docuseries, which I happen to binge watch, but it kind of removes those layers of what happens behind the scenes. And that's happening across every sport. And I think Stars Play now has a partnership with PFL. Same thing. We're starting to see more streaming platforms welcome sports content because they know that that's where audiences are going to tune in, but then also leverage the documentary, the docu-series to continue, keeping that audience engaged.
And it's what I think is great behind that business model is there's huge amounts of money in it. It's constantly exciting. Plus, the cast will retire.
Yeah.
And you get a new cast that comes on, so it's going to stay fresh. If you own the platform, if you own the NFL or you own, the Premier League, you don't have to worry about the cast being around too long. And just you're doing most other TV and radio and so on, that there's a new breed coming in every year.
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing concern. New money comes in, new audiences come in. Maybe sports is the smartest area that we should have jumped into and taken hold of. I think where do you see influencers getting in now? We've already established the fact that a lot of people get in thinking it was money and there's money for the right people. What would you suggest to somebody who wants to begin their career in some kind of broadcasting? They've got a phone, they've got a desire, they've got a couple of lights, they've got a passion, but they don't know where to start. What would you suggest?
I think that's such an interesting question because I think the number one DM that I receive is, can you help me get on TV? That's the number one DM. And because I receive it so frequently, that's why I started these boot camps a couple of years ago, mainly because there's a whole world of people who want to grow as presenters, but they've never experienced it. You've never actually tried being in a studio or having an earpiece or reading from an auto cue. So get trained. I would say number one is get trained. But what fascinates me is when we do these workshops is I realize how many of them are not producing their own content on their own social media pages or have private pages or whatever it may be. And I'm sitting there thinking, how are you expecting anyone to discover you if you aren't willing to put yourself out there and be consistent and show your passion? And even now, if tomorrow I have to cast for a new TV show, the first thing I'm going to do is look at people's social profiles and get a gauge of what their personalities are like and gauge, their passion and also their consistency in producing that content. So to answer your question, I would say if you want to be in this ecosystem, you need to start by creating it yourself. And I see so many people who just don't put the effort in. So if you really want it, look at your own social pages as your own mini media station and start pumping out content. It's not complicated anymore. You can do it on your phone. You could do it for free. And, over time and practice, you'll start to understand what your viewers are interested in. But the key is keep doing it, be consistent, and show your knowledge and passion. Because, most people know that the popular types of content right now are education or entertainment. I find entertainment challenging. I don't think I'm very funny. But education, you know what? Lots of people want to learn. So see how you can add value and grow independently if you really want to stand a strong chance of attracting a bigger opportunity.
But there's an area that you didn't mention that was key to what you did and what you do on an ongoing basis. Reach out. Get turned down a lot by lots of people because somebody will say yes and all you need is one yes.
I believe in that fully. I also believe in manifesting and visualizing, and in my head I've done it and I'm there and I can see the path. I think everyone under the sun knows I'm obsessed with Expo. I've contacted everyone, I've messaged everyone, I flew to Japan, I tag them regularly. If for whatever reason this doesn't materialize, it's not going to be because I didn't try everything that was in my hands to try.
Explain a bit more. Obsessed with Expo. Tell me about it.
So we were very fortunate to produce a daily live show at Expo 2020 in Dubai. Expo 2025 is currently taking place in Osaka, and Expo 2030 will take place in Riyadh. And in my world, I have already visualized that we're in Riyadh. So working on Expo 2025 is part of our journey, and I've literally spent the last year, everyone at Expo 2025 knows me, everyone at the UAE Pavilion knows me, every country pavilion knows me. I've literally posted about them. I did 100 days of posting in a row. I tagged them consistently. I flew to Japan and, I ended up having a meeting, and I will do everything in my power to attract that opportunity because I never want to sit there and think, I should have tried that. And that's the key. If it doesn't materialize, Maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe there's another route to getting to Riyadh, but it's not going to be because I didn't do my best and think out the box and reach out when I could have. And that's because I've had so many things work out for me. I've had so many times in my career where because I've persisted, because I've followed up, because I've thought out of the box, I've been able to attract the opportunity. So I believe it works. You just need to keep thinking on who and how and where to get to that end objective.
I love that. One of the things that I learned from Dariush in the early days, we've known each other like decades, is when you don't get a sale to convert, what you say is, okay, next. And you just move on to the next one until it does.
Yeah.
You don't dwell on it. You don't feel terrible about it. You move on and so on. How do you get over when you do have the challenges that you've worked really hard on it and it hasn't converted? What keeps you driving and what's your end game?
God, so many questions in there. I think for me, how do I get over it? I really, truly believe everything happens for a reason. Like, I really believe that. If for whatever reason a project hasn't converted or moved forward, wasn't meant for me, wasn't meant to happen, and more often than not, it opens up another opportunity, or someone you've met leads to something else. So, and you never know. I've had things come back 2 years later, 3 years later, 5 years later.
When we understand that you're ahead of the gauge by telling them.
Yeah, so I don't really take it personally. I just see it as, okay, we've learned from that. What can we learn from it is key. So I ask everybody, if for whatever reason it didn't work out, can you give me feedback? I want to understand why. Because if I understand why, that's going to set me up for the next opportunity. So I think that's a key one for me in terms of moving forward. But I'm very vision oriented. So my whole team, we do a company vision board every year. We revise it and we review it every 8 weeks. It's very key in terms of where we want to be and where we want to go. So I don't really dwell too much on the past. I look forward, and I definitely want to grow in the TV space. So talking about traditional, non-traditional, I want to be producing more shows, whether they end up on broadcast channels, they end up on streaming platforms, whether we successfully have more examples and case studies like Arva's of taking individuals straight from, YouTube through to TV. That's what I want. I want the next, 4 or 5 years I want to have hundreds of them. I don't want to just have Arva, I want to have hundreds of people who can say, they came through our boot camp, we launched a YouTube channel and now there's a show on TV or on a streaming platform, because I believe it's possible for anyone to do this. If they have the right passion, the right mindset and the consistency, they can do it. And that's what I want to prove.
Where do you want to be?
Where do I want to be? I want to be living on an island. No, I want to be, I genuinely love what I do. I genuinely do. So I would love to be, as I mentioned, kind of head of this empire where we've now got multiple shows running, multiple streamers, multiple broadcasters. If it's 2030, I'll be in Riyadh because, Expo 2030
because you've manifested it.
I've manifested it. Expo 2030, we'll be producing a daily show there. And I don't see myself stepping back from this industry because I love it so much. But I do, on my vision board is an Academy Award. So I do see myself standing at the Academy Awards. So that's the big goal.
And what would your speech be?
What would my speech be? My speech would be focused on being grateful for the journey. And also I want to inspire absolutely anyone out there that they can do what they set their mind to.
What an inspiration. It's been a pleasure and an honor to finally get a chance to chat with you. I can't believe in 18 years we've never had this kind of conversation before, but I look forward to having many more like this. Wishing you all the best of luck for, you don't need luck, you create your own luck. Expo 25, Expo 2030. Looking forward to seeing more of your incredible influencers coming in to conventional old media and new media, and also connecting on LinkedIn to see what you're going to do next. It's been a pleasure to chat to you. Thank you so much, Reem.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Amazing. So there's Reim El Houni. Make sure you connect with her on social. Make sure you follow her journey or even get in touch with her. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I respond. I want to make things happen. I'm ready to collaborate. If you have passion and faith, just drop me a message.
You do not get a better invitation than that. Look forward to talking to Reim again in the future and also sharing some more insights with some more incredible people that are making things happen that will help you to fast track to where you need to be. Keep pushing. Gladiator TV gives you the very best opportunities to think about what you do and raise your game, and also let me know how I can raise mine. Love your comments, your questions, but most of all, thank you for your time. We look forward to catching you next time, and maybe Dariush will be back in this seat and I'll be on the other side again. There's only one way to find out. Have an amazing day. Catch you next time on Gladiator TV.